going to spend a little bit of time looking at just some of the people in the Christmas stories that are like too familiar to us, that we're reading right past these actual human beings with real emotions and things. I want to look at some of the humanity in these stories. And so I'm going to start where Luke starts. He opens the story of Jesus by telling us about an old priest named Zechariah in a ceremony burning incense in the temple. Now, Zechariah is an old man with an old wife and tells us that they're righteous, they're right in God's eyes, but they're childless. That's a really big deal in this culture. Like being childless in general, it's still a big issue. Infertility is still, you know, very, I don't know, difficult even today. But for them, it was huge. Like family was everything for these people, and they started families really young. Like you had you were well into having your family by your teen years, and so like these this couple has been decades and decades, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 years of just that burden of can't have a child and being looked down on because they can't have a child, and people assuming, well, that God must be displeased with you for something and that's why you don't have a child. Like just it's been so long, and they have been praying about it. He's a priest, she's from the priestly line as well. Like this is a ministry family, and they've spent time praying about it, because when an angel appears and talks to him and says, your prayer has been answered. So it's clearly this is a prayer that's been going on. But also, the ceremony that Zechariah is doing is this burning incense, and that's a very symbolic thing. It represents prayer. So this story is just all about prayer. And the smoke rising as the incense burns is symbolic of the prayers ascending to heaven. That imagery is all throughout Scripture. But Zechariah is a priest. He would have known all this. He knows exactly what's going on and what he's doing. And it really makes me think that he must have been thinking about his own prayers over the years and just feeling that frustration of like, man, yeah, I prayed, but never actually worked for us. Because when the angel appears, like the first thing he says after, hey, don't freak out, because everyone's always afraid of an angel when they show up. But the first thing he says is, your prayer has been answered. It's like he's coming into a conversation that Zechariah was already thinking about that prayer. And Gabriel says, yeah, that prayer has been answered. But Zechariah is just so numb from a lifetime of praying and disappointment, and that he can't even like stir up excitement on that. He can't even believe it. He's like, what? Maybe, I guess. Like, why would I think it's going to happen now? It hasn't for all these years. And Gabriel gets kind of snarky about it, and he's like, oh, you don't believe me? Like, I'm Gabriel, man. I'm an angel from God's presence, but fine. You're not going to talk until this comes true. And that's a big thing, too, because Zechariah is doing this thing. He's representing the people to God in burning the incense, but then he's supposed to come back out and represent God to the people. Luke tells us there's a crowd out there waiting for him to come out because he's going to come and speak a blessing. He pronounces a benediction over them. But when he comes out, he can't do that. Instead, he has to play charades with the priest and try to get them to understand what just happened. And so there's a lot in this story, because Zechariah, this whole thing is about prayer. He's spent his life praying for this, and no doubt has given up by now. And when an angel shows up and tells him, yeah, it's going to happen, he's got nothing left. I don't know if frustration is the right word, but he's just empty and can't even muster up belief or enthusiasm. Just like, where were you 50 years ago? Like, I don't even want a kid anymore. I'm too old for that. But for one, like, that's fair. Like, that real life will do that to you sometimes. But at the same time, that doesn't disqualify him. God still keeps that promise. God still gives them that miracle. It does all play out exactly like Gabriel says, but it's real, and that's what I love so much about these stories. Like these are real people, like enduring real struggles, and even when a miracle comes along, it's like, yes, your prayer is going to be answered. It's like, it's hard to even accept it. And like, we can beat ourselves up if we're in that scenario. And I think that's why this story is in here, to show us that, yeah, this can happen, but he's still used. God still fulfills the prophecy. And I'm not going to say it's a great idea. It did cost him the opportunity to pronounce the blessing over the people, which may have been a once in a lifetime opportunity. So it can hurt you, but it's not the end of the story.